The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
Rasheen Aldridge did not support Mayor Kara Spencer in the 2025 election, but he had worked with her to represent downtown when they were on the St. Louis Board of Aldermen, and he felt he could do the same in her new role. He speaks highly of Spencer's performance at a personal level after the May 16th tornado, but he says the city was not prepared for it or other major natural disasters. The alderman of the 14th Ward joins me next on the latest episode of Politically Speaking. Let's hit the music.
This is the Politically Speaking podcast, the definitive show about Missouri politics.
We've seen a county government that has had smooth and steady leadership, and I think we're on a good path right now.
I realized the office needed a prosecutor to run it.
And we have a better solution of addressing those needs.
I don't think it's about a popularity contest. What I think it about is it's time for change.
Working together across city and county, across political affiliations, that we can start to find overlapping goals.
I had some moments where I had to lean into my courage.
You'll see us work together on areas of agreement, and you'll see us have difficult conversations when we don't agree.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Rachel Littman. Joining me today in studio is
Alderman Rasheen Aldridge of the 14th Ward.
And welcome back to Politically Speaking. As I was getting this interview together, I realized that you'd been on the show at the very start of the Board of Aldermen session. You'd been on the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air with Jason Rosenbaum. And then less than a month after you were on that show, a tornado hit the city.
Yeah.
How did you and your loved ones fare in that storm?
I actually remember that day. I went home, and me and my partner, we was like, it's one of those long days, and we was going to take a midday nap. And the storm kind of came through, and I stayed downtown. But, used to storm coming through in St. Louis, like, actually, this is great. I'm going to sleep a little better. And I would say probably a few minutes after the storm went through, I got a call from President Green about how Northside had really got hit by the storm. And then I got on Facebook, and I remember just looking at Natural Bridge, and I think it was Anthony Shaheed at the time, was Facebook Live, and it looked like, a tsunami had just came through. In the downtown area, I think we fared very well. In the 14th Ward, College Hill it's like the last neighborhood of my neighborhood, was hit pretty bad. Not as bad as, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard or Alderwoman Keys area, but it was the last neighborhood that it hit before going into the Illinois side. So it has been a whirlwind to just see this devastation. And, as we talk right now, I think a lot of people, kind of think it's over, but it's really not.
It sounds like you and your partner were okay. Did all of the rest of the family and the ones people really close to you, are they okay?
Yeah, everyone's okay. Me and my partner. My stepdad, his home, he stay off of Kennelly, kind of more on the west side. He had some roof damage. I had some family that my auntie Karen, she actually works for the assessor's office, but her home is right off Natural Bridge. Oh, I forget that street, but it's right off Natural Bridge where it ripped through. And she literally, I was at City Hall today, and she's like, hey, I got the debris in my backyard. When is the city going to, come and pick it up? She didn't want to move it to the front of the street, but she's been able to remove a lot of debris from the back. But that home is damaged. So, it's kind of a hit and miss a little bit. I'm okay. My home downtown's okay, but some of my family homes it's not completely damaged, but there's definitely some tornado damage, and the insurance is not unfortunately helping, especially with my auntie Karen that was in the heart of, she stayed like right across the street from Fairground that was in the heart of the tornado.
And so what are you learning as you are reaching out to your family, to your residents who were hit, and you're hearing from the older women whose wards were just clobbered by this? What are the main needs that are still out there? What isn't finished yet?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think a lot of people are still really frustrated. And sometimes it makes me, being in a role or a position as an alder person, feel like, what else more can I do? What else more can the Board of Aldermen do? Because, we're talking about areas and that have been hit by the tornado that already was not seeing resources, that have been deprived, that have not had any development in a very long time. And then on top of it, this tornado. And between, FEMA being very slow with the rollout, the state still not bringing in the state funds. And to be honest, as somebody who carried the $30 million of the Rams bill, is not moving, I think, fast enough, to be honest, to my liking. But as well as I think everyday people that are out in the community, and they're asking what is next. When will they kind of see some relief from agencies, from federal government to state government to local government? And it's sad because government moves so slow. They have more questions than I think city government have answers. It's $1 billion storm that hit this area.
At least probably $1 billion.
At least a billion. The numbers are all over, but at least $1 billion, if not probably more than that. That I don't think city government has still wrapped their head around, like, how do we get out of this? And it's going to take some time. But, what I hear from people is still frustration. People are calling me as a budget chair. So, hey, you passed the $30 million. Where's like the home repair? Where's the funds to be able to, apply within the city to, fix up my home? And, between RFPs and getting signed at the comptroller office, things are just not moving, I think, as fast as people assume that they would when they see, ARPA, or I mean, not ARPA, when FEMA's coming, or that the Board of Aldermen passed these Rams bill. People are still waiting to see results.
And is this a failure, or is this just people's expectations being beyond, as you said, the capacity or the speed of city government?
I'm sure people listening to this would probably be, I wouldn't say upset what I'm going to say, but being in city government, I wouldn't say it's a failure. I would say it is the slow processes of city government. And, the reason that we did the Rams bill the way we did and allowed to go directly to the mayor's office for like emergency contracts is to kind of get through some of these processes to be able to get the money out the door. And no one, I think, was prepared or would have thought that we would have had this level of, damage done by rain or by a storm, by a tornado, where we have to now put processes in place that was never in place. So, an act of God, I wouldn't really say is a failure, but it is definitely, I think, hopefully for us and others around the region, kind of opened up our eyes that we need to be ready for, as climate change is real, as more storms will probably get worse, as winter is not going to get better. We need to, start to look at what it looks like to have a natural disaster plan.
You said it wasn't necessarily a failure in that, the processes are working to the extent that this is baked into the city system and we are following what the system is. What is the change that they need to make in the cogs and the wheels to get the city ready for this, or even just to make day-to-day life easier for people wanting to do things in the city?
One of the things we absolutely could have done better is making sure that our SEMA department was well staffed. Not only more staff, but a plan in place so that when another storm happens, how do we not only sound the alarm to residents, how do we make sure that we have emergency systems in place for us contracting? How do we look through a way where we don't have to go through an RFP process? How do we ensure that if a storm were to come again, that we already have the right emergency equipment, that we have the emergency support on staff? I think it is looking at our whole process, and at some point, debriefing, maybe a year or two from now, debriefing with alders and all folks that are hands on deck and community of what we can do better. We also need to look at ways that, to be honest, that these contracts get signed quicker to get the money out from E&A to the the comptroller office. Is that after E&A pass it, is it the comptroller sitting right there signing it so that we can get these funds out a lot quicker to get the necessary individuals, entities out to ensure that resources are hitting people, but also debris or whatever need to be picked up or cleaned up, those companies are getting what they need quicker than the slow process that city government has.
How do you balance getting prepared for the next storm, staging, stocking up, staffing up SEMA, while also meeting the day-to-day needs of the city?
The city budget is pretty healthy right now. We have in our surplus, I want to say like $124 million.
Rainy day fund for if, something happens.
Something happened. We got a nice amount compared to our friends in the county. No dig there, but, we have a nice amount. But I think we will see some of those surplus, eaten into with, overtime that a lot of employees have tapped into during this tornado. So, for me, I think it's kind of a two-phase. One, we have to really, work with personnel to figure out how do we beef up staffing? How do we, hopefully a pay plan will be coming out soon. What do we need to do to make sure that we have enough people to that's working in city government to make sure that every city or every regular day services are happening? So that's something that has always been a problem, that we just do not have enough people. But we also need to have somebody, if it's a budget team or whoever, long-term looking at, what do we need to have stocked up if a tornado happens? How much money should we have in a certain account just for this? And how are we going to be able to use the access or the additional extra money in a way in our reserves to probably start the process even before, we wait on the federal government or before we wait on the state government. If this were to happen again, praying to God it doesn't, but will we have, an account that has already just $25 million that's ready to just, be executed to be able to get contracts in place so that we can start to move on cleanup without waiting for federal government or without waiting for the state government. Sometimes we can't wait on federal government to save our city. We appreciate their assistance, but we need to set up an account so that we can be ready to go on day one.
As we wait for state and federal money to start moving through, what are the needs that the Board of Aldermen can meet?
Well, I think, honestly, we're going to have to start talking about introducing another Rams bill. I have been saying it for a while. We're going to have to tap into the Rams principle, and it's going to be a different conversation of past Rams bill debates that have happened, where they looked more of like childcare or college savings and, infrastructure and stuff like that. I will say I think there's going to have to be a big focus on investing those dollars into North St. Louis.
What can the board put in place to help protect the residents in the long run in the wards that have been impacted by the tornado, to let those who want to stay protect those who want to stay in their neighborhoods and not get forced out by a Paul McKee type?
Yeah, I think it's a $1 million question that, how do we ultimately ensure that gentrification doesn't happen? And I know I've talked with people, and already people have been reaching out to residents saying, hey, do you want to sell? Do you want to sell? Do you want to sell? Something that's not popular to say, the rebuilding is going to take some time. But as that rebuild happen and people are committed to staying, I think it's two things. I think we need to figure out ways to incentivize, and I don't know if this is through a new Rams bill, but incentivize those wards that have been impacted with some type of incentive to stay, or some type of incentive to rebuild, to show like, hey, we want you to stay here. And at the same time, our zoning needs to look a little bit more flexible in those areas that have been impacted, and have a lot more flexibility of being able to get building permits or being able to get certain permits so that they can rebuild. Or zoning is, not saying homes have to be in a certain manner in this area. Like it's going to be, I think, a little bit more of a free-for-all of what they can look like in that area so that people can stay. A lot of these families have been devastated. As we say, this is like Big Mama house. So Big Mama means it was Granny's house, but,
even great granny.
Or great granny, and it's been passed along. And that is generational wealth for a family, but also so much history that has happened in those homes. And we want to make sure that the city show that we care. in this area, there's going to have to be some new tools used to incentivize residents to also rebuild, if it's, small interest loans or whatever it is, to be able to rebuild and stay in the community that they grew up in before this tornado.
Can the process of government move fast enough to do that?
Oh, that is the $1 million question. I don't know yet. I think somebody would sit here and say yes or no. I would say I don't know yet. I would say I think it is a challenge that we need to take on. I think it's a challenge that we need to be, again, as we walk and chew gum, as we're trying to recover, and as we move from recovery to rebuilding, and then from rebuilding to stabilization in that whole process. I think we need to also be having conversations of how do we cut red tape? How do we make government faster? How do we make government more efficient? You want to make sure that you have checks and balances in place so that things don't fall through the crack. But those are conversations that I think we haven't had, that during this tornado it needs to be even more of a focus. At the Board of Aldermen last session, we started 24-25. We started a red tape committee.
Mm-hmm.
And
has that done anything?
My food truck bill went through there.
All right.
But, and I got to bring that board bill back, and we got red tape now, another committee, and it can be utilized a lot more to look at, how can this committee be used to bring in the license collector, bring in the building division, bring in all the stakeholders, and figure out how do we make things move more efficient.
How would you rate the city's response to the tornado overall? And has your view of that changed in the last 5 months since the storm?
You're coming with the hardball questions. And I'm going to be honest with you. I would say, since we've never had this type of tornado since, I think, 1950 something, I would rate us a 6.5 to 7. I would say there's absolutely a lot of room to grow. I would also say, this is something that we wasn't prepared for. City government was not prepared for a natural disaster like this to happen, and did not have the funding, did not have the manpower, did not have the support. I think we have, with the space and the hand and the cards that have been dealt to us, I think we have been at sometimes below average, and I think at sometimes we've probably been just at average. I cannot give us, above average yet until, we get to the rebuilding, or that we start to see a little bit more information on how this recovery is going. And I would say that it hasn't, the 5 months, it hasn't changed. I don't think, city government can pat ourselves on the back just yet. I think we need to continue to listen, we need to continue to learn, and we need to continue, more importantly, to act. And until we are out of the dust a little bit, then we can say, okay, we made some improvements. But I understand that residents want more, and part of it, as we talked about, is they have expectations to see something now. And I mean, if I was in a home that wasn't habitable and not sure what's going to happen next, I totally understand. Also, being in government, not an answer that people love. I know that it's moving slow, but I do know between alder people that have been affected by the tornado, and the affected wards, I should say, aldermen in the affected wards, and this Board of Aldermen and the mayor's office has been trying to figure out what we can do to make sure that, we don't lose population and we keep people in their homes. And I'll be honest, sometimes we don't have the answers, and sometimes it's a lot of research, and sometimes we think we have the answers and have to go back to the drawing board. But I think we are hovering right at that below average, because the expectations from the community, we're not meeting them. And at the same time, it's hard for government to meet them when we were not set up to be super fast to respond to such a storm like this.
What did the tornado and the aftermath teach you about the city?
I wouldn't say it taught me, but I hope it taught other people in the city, and I hope the attention really shift that where this tornado touched down and was an area that if we probably invested more love, care, and more development, we wouldn't be starting so far back. The lack of attention that has been given to where these neighborhoods have been hit by the tornado before the storm was already horrible, but now after the storm, it's only, I wouldn't even say ripped off a Band-Aid. The wound has always been there. Now the wound is more open. So what I hope that it has taught, powers to be and other government leaders that do not live in North St. Louis is that we need to, of course, invest in all of St. Louis, but we have to truly put more anchors in North Side, because I believe if there was more investment, the people in North St. Louis wouldn't be starting as far back as they are right now in the recovery.
And we'll be right back after a quick break.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
And we're back on Politically Speaking with Alderman Rasheen Aldridge of the 14th Ward. And when you were on the Politically Speaking Hour, you mentioned that you could work with then new Mayor Kara Spencer. She's now been in office for, about 6 months now?
Yeah, about so, yeah.
And then, has that proven to be the case? Are you able to work with her?
I was able to work with her when she was my colleague down at the Board of Alder. Me and her shared the downtown area. She was the 8th Ward, I was 14th Ward. I think I probably have about 60% of downtown or so, and she has maybe 40, 45, I have 55. But, we work very well together as colleagues at the board. I was rooting for our former mayor, but at the end of the day, she is the mayor. I've been able to work with her on legislation when it came to the Rams bill. The first person that I called was Megan Green, and I reached out to Casey Millbrook in the mayor's office, and then I talked to the mayor hey,
you and Casey go way back.
Way back, Jeff City days. Oh my, she's a rock star. That is one person that the mayor made a great decision on keeping on. But it's been great working with the mayor, and I would actually say, the mayor has been very open to communication during this tornado. During the tornado, she, always, I think, from alders that were impacted by the tornado, her phone line stayed open. She impressed me a lot during the tornado, and I know people criticized her. I know, even as an activist side of me, there was some things I wish she, could have done better. But I will say, I think she handled it. And what people don't see every day, what happened behind the scenes of her communicating with alders in the impacted area, making sure that departments was on in those impacted areas. She really impressed me how she handled it. Of course, we can always look back and say what she could have done better, but I've been able to work with her during this storm. I think the tornado has actually also extended the honeymoon process for the Board of Aldermen and the mayor. We probably, thought fireworks would have happened sooner, but it's given her, I think, an opportunity to show alders who, work with her, but maybe didn't support her in the election, that she is committed to being a mayor for the whole city, and especially in this tornado, to work with people that, represent North St. Louis.
What are some of the key pieces of your legislative agenda?
One of the things that I'm excited, hopefully they'll be coming down the pipeline, especially as we talk about, tornado, is looking at how do we make sure that tenants are being protected. The Board of Aldermen has passed several pieces of legislation around tenant rights and several pieces around legislation around making sure that there's funding for tenants such as Impacted Tenants Fund, which I'm excited that I've been able to champion, making sure, the bill was passed. I did a kind of rewrite of the bill to make sure the act of God. But there's always this funding gap. We're still in a little bit of funding gap, but I will say there's some good news coming down the pipeline on that. There was a commitment during the budget committee. I carried $1 million from reserve to go to Impact Tenants Fund. That got scratched, saying it would come out of Rams. It hasn't come out yet, but like I say, there will be some development where the Impact Tenants Fund will finally be fully funded.
And operational? Because I know that took a little bit, that kind of seemed to have like fallen through the cracks in terms of actually getting the programming behind it going.
Yes, and I think it would have been operational if it actually got off the ground. You know, the funds from ARPA a few years ago went to this program for $100,000 for administration, and the $100,000 is still sitting. We have never allowed the program to operate to know if it's operable or not, and that's why I keep telling the mayor's office, let's move this small chunk of money before we add additional money. So, you know, I've talked with Employment Connections, who's supposed to be the vendor doing it. I think they're ready to do it. They're waiting on the city to act. But hopefully there'll be some future legislation that also, you know, protect more tenants as well, so that they have rights that we've already implemented, but so that they know what those rights are. One of the things that I'm really focused on also, even though we previously passed it, but now we're in the phase of what it looks like to get these letters out the door when it comes to the board bill that had the blight redevelopment for the area around St. Louis Place, JVL, the Paul McKee, bad developer bill, however you want to call it. But now that that bill is passed, which will probably go down as one of the bills that are my favorite bills I was able to work on with community, because I also grew up in that area. I grew up and I've seen how, you know, Paul McKee got all this land, and just have heard over years of how people that have lived next to, you know, some of his properties or next to a lot, it has just let these beautiful brick homes decay, or the lots, you know, I mean, weeds are as high as me. I'm about 5'5", but I mean, that's still pretty high.
That's very tall grass.
That's still high. But how do we now, with that bill being passed, working with SLDC in the mayor's office, you know, continue what former Mayor Tashara Jones did with sending out the letters, and now where are we with the negotiation? And
these were the eminent domain letters. This is basically saying we are seizing this property because you haven't done anything with it. We want to get it into the hands of another developer so they can work with it.
Yes, and it's a little bit before the eminent domain. It's the letters that basically say, let's negotiate first.
Okay.
And if negotiation don't follow through, then we will go forward with eminent domain. So these letters were sent out to put him on notice, and before just doing eminent domain, there is a negotiation because, you know, court takes longer during the eminent domain process. So the city has offered a price for several parcels to try to negotiate with Mr. Paul McKee, and then if not, then the eminent domain process. But that's one of the things that I'm really excited to hopefully see happen in the next year. And then the last thing, as we, you know, get closer to closing out this session and see what happens after that, is there will be a bill that comes down the pipeline I'm working on to look at how do we reform Prop NS. You know, it's
and that's the stabilize the buildings so developers can redo them.
Yes, I think the program has a lot of benefits to be able to work with residents who want to take back some of these properties, to be able to, the city helps stabilize, and then the residents take it a little further. But there's a little, you know, reform that needs to happen with it, and, you know, couldn't be a better time now with, you know, the tornado of how do we make sure that more buildings in North St. Louis are stabilized, and using some of the funds that we have to stabilize them, but then turning around and giving them to residents and actually support them during the process.
With the NGA site now open, I don't know exactly when they're moving everybody up there, but with it now being a functional operating site, does Paul McKee have any incentive to give up that land around that site?
You know, I think, you know, if even without any incentives, the way that I am looking at it is that he's going to have to give it up. I mean, that he had an opportunity, I think, over the last won several alders before me over the last several decades to try to do something.
It's been at least 2008, 9. I don't remember when this first came up, but yeah.
I remember kind of around the April Ford Griffin days, who amazing alderwoman, and it kind of continued on after there with Alderman Hubbard and so on. But, there was, I think, a huge opportunity for him to do something with these parcels. And, even with him knowing, and, I will give him a little credit that he worked with the city to swap the land, where Pruitt-Igoe is, the city owned that, and he owned the NGA, to swap it so that
whole complicated story that actually ended up, I think, revealing how much financial trouble he was in with some of it, but yes.
Yeah, and the bank will wash and everything, yeah. For him to do that so we can get NGA, but he just hasn't shown up to the carpet. There is not one person in my ward that I talked to in St. Louis Place or JVL that will give him another opportunity to stay in the ward to say, I have a grand plan to build. So with NGA coming in, you would think, he would have put some things already in place. He just does not have a track record of touching anything that can be successful. Maybe besides a gas station that's off Tucker, but the grocery store across the street, Greenleaf, another flop, something that could have been really
something that is needed in that area of the city,
Absolutely.
An accessible grocery store, not just quarter markets are useful, but they are not grocery stores.
And I would say, when it was up and going and they had quality food, it wasn't just like a grade B type food. People want quality food as well, instead of, like you say, going to
and deserve quality food.
And deserve it, and they don't. They're tired of going to the gas station. They're tired of going to the corner store. But when you need something quick and you can't have transportation to get to a grocery store, that's where you go. And that could have been something that I think could have maybe turned the tide a little bit with people with him if he would have shown. People have been saying for the longest, since I think way back when, there used to be like a Snooks, which a National, that sat in the open lot across the street where the gas station was, but that we have a food desert. We need a grocery store.
What is the closest grocery store? Is it the Schnucks up on Natural Bridge in Union to that area? Or is there one that I'm not thinking of?
I would say Aldi's. Aldi's at Natural Bridge and Grand. And Aldi's have really upgraded,
There's an Aldi's at Natural Bridge and Grand?
Yep.
Yes, there is. Okay, yeah, right across from the park. You're right.
Yep. Or maybe the Save-A-Lot at Grand and Page. Or if you want to get bougie, which a lot of people, I'm sure in my area won't, the Schnucks that is downtown on Tucker, the Culinaire Schnucks.
Culinaria, yeah.
Culinaria. But yeah, I would say the closest.
I think that's 9th, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I said some on Tucker. Yeah, not Tucker. 9th and like Olive. But yeah, the Aldi's would probably be the closest. So there's no quality, affordable grocery store in that area. And again, he's shown with that he just can't do anything positive in that community, where people will want to give him a third, fourth, fifth chance.
As you look ahead to 2027, are you thinking you'll go again for 14? Are you eyeing potentially other offices?
I would say, when I came home from being a state rep for 5 years up in Jefferson City, this has been probably the best political job that I've had, from committee man in 2016 to, then running for state rep. My activist background, always, even growing up, as a little boy that grew up in Carr Square, I always wanted to help my neighborhood. I always wanted to, I went to Parkway, but I lived in the city, and I didn't understand why, Parkway West, that neighborhood, had so much more opportunities in my own neighborhood. And this role of alderman has really been able to reground me, and feeling like I was kind of feeling a little hopeless when I was state level. I was starting to rethink, like, is this the role that I need to be in? Because, when you're in Jeff City, you're gone Monday through Thursday. We get beat up every day being in super minority. Note, I was on budget. I was able to bring a lot of money home, but I didn't feel like I was making direct change in my neighborhood. But since being alderman, I feel like there's sense of energy and purpose of being able to connect people to certain departments to get what they need. We've done some big infrastructure projects in the ward, and more coming. Today we're getting some streets paved. I've been on Kent Flakehead, who's the interim streets director, to hey, we need some love and care up north. So, you know, it's an honor every day that I wake up to be able to not only represent the neighborhood I grew up in, but represent the people who have entrusted me to represent them either in the same ward or new areas for the last several years. And, you know, as I look to 2027, I plan to do another term. I plan to run and continue to make some progress on what we have started in the 14th. Like I say, the biggest one is, you know, trying to figure out how do we get development going in this ward and get a bad actor out of our community that has not done anything good for us. You know, I've worked with the Downtown Neighborhood Association to pass the surface parking lot bill that they've been trying to work on before myself in there. And, you know, having this unique perspective of, you know, growing up north, but now I live downtown, you know, I think this ward has a great opportunity to, you know, be able to not only work across boundary lines between downtown and North St. Louis, but it also serves as a ward that I think is unique to the rest of the city where, you know, you have a north side and a downtown all represented in one ward. And how do we also start to look at downtown not just being south of like Cole Street? You know, we've passed a SID that is going to be the new downtown north. How do we use some of that downtown energy to spearhead development in North St. Louis? So definitely, you know, I'm planning to run again, and I want to continue to serve the people of the 14th. I had a good time doing it. I think there's a lot more that we need to do together, and I'm ready to tie up my laces and make sure my prosthetic is tight for a strong race that may come in 2027.
Politically Speaking is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, part of the University of Missouri St. Louis. 14th Ward Alderman Rasheen Aldridge, thanks for coming on again.
I'm so glad to be here again. Thank you, guys.
Until next time, so long.